Good afternoon, and welcome to today's lecture on springboard diving. I'm excited to share some information about this lesser-known Olympic sport with you, a sport I am very passionate about. The sport of diving really only gains exposure to the public eye every 4 years during the Olympic Games. With that in mind, it is my goal to shed some light on this hidden gem of the athletics world with you all. We'll be going over the basics of the sport, including some information on the diving board itself, the various directions or types of dives, the positions that dives are completed in, technique that is required, and the scoring system. By the end of the lecture, you should have a great base knowledge of the sport and hopefully a greater appreciation for the sport that will keep you anticipating the 2020 Olympic Games a little bit more. A few of the specifics or aspects of the sport that we will be covering include the details of the diving board, the front, back, reverse, inward, and twisting dives, the tuck, pike, and straight positions, the takeoff, the entry, general technique, how the dive is scored, and how a normal meet is run. The diving board itself has evolved over the years. The most current version can be seen on top and the previous version on bottom. The current board incorporates a tapered design with both ends being quite thin and wider closer to the middle where the board sits on the fulcrum. The holes on the end of the current version allow for water to drain, as well as allowing for less air resistance as the diver moves through the hurdle. The first dive group we will discuss is the front dive group. This dive group is characterized by the diver starting their approach at the back of the board, taking no less than 3 steps toward the end of the board, and jumping, rotating forward away from the board and towards the water. Front dives can range from a simple half rotation to a difficult 4.5 rotations. The next group is the reverse group. A reverse dive begins the same as a front dive would, but as the diver begins the reverse dive, they jump forward but rotate backwards toward the board. Most non-divers know this type of dive as a gainer. These dives often present to beginners as frightening and difficult, but can easily be mastered like any other dive. Next, we have the back dive group. Back dives start with the diver standing on the end of the board with his back to the water. Force is created by gently oscillating or bouncing the board and then pressing or squatting into the board to initiate the jump. The diver then rotates backward away from the board and enters the water facing away from the board, unlike fronts and reverses. The fourth main group is the inward dive group. These dives are also started at the end of the board with the diver's back facing the water, just like the back group. The jump is initiated the same as the back dive, however, the diver then rotates forward towards the dive. This is another dive group that often frightens beginners and even some experienced divers as they can see the board as they are rotating towards it. There is another group of dives called twisters. Twisters can be completed in any of the 4 directions we just discussed. Not only does the diver have to rotate forward or backward, but also must rotate to the side. The twisting portion of the dive must be done while the body is straight for the diver to create momentum and twist well. There are 3 main positions that a dive can be done in. The first that we'll discuss is the tuck position. This position is characterized by the diver being bent at the knees and the hips. The diver must grab his shins and pull his legs toward his chest. This position allows for the fastest rotation as the diver is in the smallest position possible with an evenly positioned center of mass. The next is the pike position. A pike dive is characterized by the diver being bent only at the hips with the knees being extended and straight. The diver wraps her arms around the back of the legs and squeezes them towards her body. Pike dives are more aesthetic but also more difficult as the diver is in a longer position and therefore rotates slower. The final position is the straight position. During a straight dive, the diver is not bent at all and must maintain extension in the hips and knees. This is the most difficult position to rotate in and is normally only used in more simple dives with less rotations. As mentioned before, however, it must be utilized during twisting dives. The takeoff of a dive either makes or breaks the dive. The front and inward dives utilize almost the same position to initiate forward rotation. This position is often referred to as the 90-90 position, as the arms throw forward and the diver bends at the hips, creating 90-degree angles as they begin their rotation. The back and reverse dive takeoffs are also almost identical. Ideally, it is a position of full body extension, typically called the C position, with arms raised overhead. This position allows the diver to jump as high as possible while creating tension that leads to more force production and higher rotation speed. The body position during the entry, when the body is entering into the water, is very important in creating as little amount of splash as possible, which plays a large role in how the dive is scored, as it is the last thing the judges see. The diver must be fully extended and straight, with the hands entering first and the body entering very vertically, perpendicular to the water. Diving is a very technical sport. The diver must be in control of every part of their body, from the head to the hands and feet. Practices include repeating each dive over and over, trying to make minute changes in technique each time, with an emphasis on creating straight lines with the body while in the air. A diver must exude grace and precision while practicing and competing their dives. Each dive is scored by a panel of impartial judges. The judges look at overall technique, straight lines, height, grace, control, and a clean or splashless entry into the water. Dives are scored in half increments from a 0, which means the dive was not completed as intended, to a 10, which is awarded for a seemingly flawless dive. Each dive has its own degree of difficulty, ranging from 1.3 to 4.8. The sum of the middle three scores from the judges is then multiplied by the dive's degree of difficulty. This results in the total score of that dive. The sum of all of the dives in the meet represent the diver's total score. The dive meet or competition is conducted in rounds. Each diver completes one dive in each round. The diver with the highest score at the end of all of the rounds is the winner of the meet. Throughout the meet, each diver must complete at least one dive from each of the 5 categories mentioned previously. If a diver fails 2 dives at any point in the meet, he or she is automatically disqualified and cannot finish their meet. I hope you found this presentation to be informative and entertaining, and that it leaves you both better educated and interested in the sport of diving. Thank you very much.